Okay, guys, let's take a look at how we're going to write our hypothesis this year in science. It may be similar or slightly different to what you're used to in the past. I know some of us, based on discussions that we had in class, you guys talked a lot about, well, I wrote it as I predict, I believe, I hypothesize. Those are great. It's an awesome way to get started. We're going to take it up a notch and we're going to start working on how to write a formal hypothesis where we connect the relationships between our variables. That's why recently in class we've been spending so much time working on being able to identify the independent, dependent, as well as our constant variables. So if we take a look here, what's a formal hypothesis? So I gave you two bits of information here. All right, it's an if-then-because statement in a hypothesis that tells the readers what you believe will happen in an investigation when something is changed. Again, there's your independent variable. So you can see the effect of that change, which is our dependent variable. Guys, something key that you need to take away from here is where I put it tells the readers what you believe will happen. All right, very important that you write as though you were the reader. Okay. And again, we want to show the relationship between our independent and dependent variable. So let's keep moving here. Now, what does if then because tell? All right, you can see up here. If is going to be your independent variable, that's telling your readers what you changed. All right, remember we talked about it being the manipulated variable. Your then is going to be your response. What do you expect to see happen because of your change? That's your dependent variable. Okay, what did the manipulated variable cause to happen? And then because you're going to tell how it's going to occur. This is going to be your scientific reasoning, whether it's background knowledge you already have or research that you've conducted. All right. Again, you'll see a keyword here to infer. We spend a lot of time on our ability to make an inference. So as we continue to move here, what I did was I gave you a couple stems that you can use to help you get started, because this may be a little bit of a transition for you. So if you look here, I said, if I test, then because, if there is a relationship between blank and blank, then blank because blank. And then this one, if blank affects blank, then and your because. So let's we'll jump into this a little bit here. So if you use the first one, if I test, basically you're telling the reader what it is that you're testing. So in class we talked about we use Quizlet, all right? So I could test to see how Quizlet impacts student grades. If I test to see how Quizlet impacts student grades, then I would expect, their grades to improve. My reasoning is because Quizlet is engaging. Okay, not only does it have the content up there, and it tells you what you did right and what you did wrong. It's engaging for you. You enjoy to play the games and see how well you did. I could also use stem number 2 right down here. Okay, if there's a relationship between Quizlet and student scores, then I should expect to see higher scores for students that use Quizlet versus students who don't. Because, and I'm going to go back to my reasonings that I used in the previous example, okay, because of the engagement, because of the ability that it tells you what you did wrong and what you did right, and it corrects you. It's a great study tool. I could also use a third stem down. Oops, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead. Oy. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, so I could also use the third stem here. If Quizlet affects test scores, then I'd give my dependent variable what I expect to happen, and then my because will be my reason why. Okay, how is that going to happen? I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's do a little bit of practice here. All right, so here's an example. Melissa raises crickets at her pet store that she sells for reptile food. She thinks that crickets will chirp more often when the temperatures get warmer. She decides to conduct an experiment to prove her theory. Now, Melissa has some background knowledge. She works at a pet store. She might have a little bit of information there to help her out. We may be sitting here saying, I don't know anything about crickets. I mean, I hear them at night, but I really don't know anything about them. This would be the perfect opportunity before you make your hypothesis where you would conduct some research. Okay? Sometimes a lot of us tend to skip that step. So let's jump in here. Okay. I'm gonna go back to our stems here, and I'm gonna use the second one for this scenario. Okay. So let me copy this, and then I'm gonna bring it over here to our cricket example. Okay. I'm gonna plug it in. Okay. So if there is a relationship between, I have to look at what I'm working with. I have to look at my two variables. All right. If I jump up here and look in this scenario, all right, what are my two variables? Let's look for the independent first. All right. She thinks that crickets will chirp more often when the temperature gets warmer. Right here, I'm talking about the temperature changing. All right. We talked about change being a key word. So that's my independent variable, and I'm going to identify that in red. Now, what's my dependent variable? What's going to be the result of this change? What's going to be the effect of this change? What data am I going to be collecting? I'm going to look at how often the crickets chirp. So let's identify this guy in purple. Okay, yeah, that looks like a good color that we can see. All right. So once I can identify my variables, I can make a pretty good hypothesis here. So let me backtrack a little bit. All right. So if there was a relationship between rate at which crickets chirp and temperature. Okay. So here I'm showing the relationship between the rate at which crickets chirp. That's my dependent variable. So let me again highlight that in purple for you. And the temperature, looks like we have a spelling error there. We can easily fix that. All right. So the temperature, I'm going to put in red. Okay. And just let's fix that spelling. Okay. Let's get rid of this line. Okay. So if there's a relationship between rate at which crickets chirp and temperature, then I'm going to make my prediction here. Then crickets will chirp more in warmer temperatures. Now, you might say, well, how do you know that? Where does that come from? That comes from some background knowledge that I have. I'm not like, all about crickets or anything like that, but I do happen to know that the warmer the temperature, the more energy the crickets have. And it's really just, I don't know if you knew this, but male crickets that chirp. Okay? So because the temperature, the more energy the crickets have. Okay? Boom. That looks good. All right. That's a pretty solid formal hypothesis. Again, I have my independent and dependent variables here. You can see up top. I'm showing the relationship. I have an if then because statement. Okay, that's key. And that looks pretty good. So what I also did was I put a couple examples here for you. Let's take a look at these. If 7th and 8th graders complete the same math problems, then the 8th graders will have more answers correct because they have studied math for 1 year longer than 7th graders. So again, what's my independent variable? The 7th and 8th graders, okay? I've taken, or I'm testing, 2 different grade levels. And I want to see the number of answers correct, all right? So that's how I'm going to know who's better at math. And then my scientific reasoning is because the eighth graders have a year, an extra year of experience in math. They might have a little bit more knowledge. Let's take a look at this one. If dry bread and moist bread are left in bags for 2 weeks, then the moist bread will grow more quickly than the dry bread, because mold is a living organism, and organisms need water to survive. Okay, we'll learn a lot about that this year in class. But again, here's my independent variable. Okay, I have two types of bread. I changed the type of bread that I used. I had dry and moist. All right, here's my control. All right, stayed in the bag for 2 weeks. Okay, I didn't change anything there. Remember, we talked about having a fair test. Here's my dependent variable. Okay, the moist bread will grow mold more quickly. And again, you have your scientific reasoning down here. Let's take a look at one more example. If some students eat breakfast before school and others do not, then the ones who do eat breakfast will have better grades in their morning classes because their brains have more energy to think. We know it's always great to get you probably hear that a lot. Hey, you got to get your day started. You got to have breakfast. Yeah, you've supplied your body with energy. Okay, that'll help it function better. Maybe have a little bit more attention in class. So that's definitely a possibility. Okay. Hope this helps. If there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask during class.